Welcome to another YouPoker Academy lesson. In this lesson we're going to talk about counting outs. Outs are defined as any card which might come which would give you the best hand, assuming you don't already have the best hand. So you usually count outs when you have something like a draw, or when you have a good but not great hand and you think you need to improve to beat your opponent. Now if you have the best hand, you don't have to count your outs, you're just going to try to put as much money in as possible. So let's talk for a minute about the most basic out situation when you've got a flush draw. So you've got the ace-4 on a 6, 8, 9 board. Your opponent obviously has two cards. You don't know what they are. In this hand, you have to assume you don't have the best hand. If your opponent goes all in, he's probably got a pair. He could have a draw. He could just have a naked 7, or even a flush draw, or the 10-jack. In which case you're ahead, but we're not going to consider those situations because we're talking about counting outs. So the first thing you need to do is count how many specific cards out of a deck of 52 would make you the best hand. Now there's 13 spades in a deck because there's 13 of every suit in a deck, but you see that 4 are already on the board. You've got your ace and your 4, your 6 and your 8. So that means 13 minus 4, there's 9 spades left in the deck. So you assume that anytime a spade comes, you're going to have the best hand. Obviously, if it's something like the 9 of spades, if this was to come, it might actually cost you the hand, but the 9 of spades can usually be considered an out. There's not often that he has a set or top 2 pair or something like that where the 9 would not be an out. But that's always a possibility. So we're going to assume that 9 cards could come that would give you the best hand. That's a good assumption to make if you don't think your ace, say if the ace of hearts was to come and give you the best hand. If you think your opponent might just have a 9 here, like a queen 9 or a jack 9, if the ace was to come, you'd also have the best hand, so you've got some extra outs here. As you know, there's 4 aces in a deck and you see 1 on the board, so you would also have 3 overcard outs if your ace was a good hand, if just top pair was a good hand. So in this situation you've got 9 outs to the flush, 3 outs to the overcard, but the overcard won't always give you the best hand. So instead of counting the full 3 outs, it's prudent to count maybe 1.5 or 2 outs for the overcard. Since you actually have a weak kicker, it might even be prudent to count just 1 out. So in this hand you've likely got somewhere between 9 and 11 outs, which means that since you know that counting outs and converting those outs to equity, as we talked about in the previous lesson, means you use the rule of 4. The rule of 4 says that you take your number of outs, you multiply it by 4, and that's the percent chance that you are to win the hand. It always works on the flop. It's always multiply your number of outs times 4, and you know you've got, in this situation, let's say 10 outs. You're 40% to win this hand. That's really good odds if there's any kind of money already in the pot. With 40% chance to win the hand and some overlay in the pot, you can tend to get all in if you don't have a really big stack. You can also raise all in and use your fold equity to make some additional chips in this hand. So in this case, we're just talking about counting outs, not fold equity or anything like that. So we assume we've got 10 outs. Let's look at another hand where we've got... Let me put these cards back really quick. Say we've got the 5-6 on something like a 4-3 king board. Well, not the king of hearts, the king of diamonds. So there's a flush draw possibility, but you've got the high end of the straight draw, so if you catch a 7 you're going to have the nuts, so long as the 7's not a heart, and if you catch the 2 you're going to have a nuts. So you know that you've got 4 7s left in the deck and 4 2s left in the deck. So reasonably you have 8 outs here. The king makes it so that you don't have any overcards to the board. If he's got a king, the 6 and the 5 won't help you, so you can't count those as outs. But you also have to be aware that if he's got a flush draw, 2 of your outs aren't any good, because if you catch the 2 of hearts or the 7 of hearts, it's actually going to give you the worst hand. So you have somewhere between 6 and 8 outs in this hand. So it's usually prudent when you have an either or like that to go in and assume you've got somewhere in the middle. So let's say you have 7 outs. By the rule of 4, you're 28% to win this hand, just under a third. So you would want to call if you were getting the proper equity to put in 28% of the pot or less. One more hand where I want to talk about counting outs. This is one that people don't usually think about, but say you have something like just a kind of a weak second pair type hand. You've got king 10, weak top pair with a weak kicker on a king 2-7. Now if your opponent wants to put in a lot of chips, there's a good chance he's got you beat. He's either got a better king or he's got something like 2 pair or a set. But you do have some outs. The 10 is likely an out. A king is sometimes an out. And if he was to have something like 7-2, or sorry, if he was to have something like king 2, then if a 7 was to come, that would also give you the best hand because you got a better kicker. You've got kings and 7s with a 2 kicker instead of, and he's got kings and 7s with no kicker at all. With a 10 kicker, he's got no kicker at all. Okay, I flubbed that up. Let me say it again. If another 7 was to come, you've got kings and 7s with a 10 kicker. He's got kings and 7s with a 2 kicker if he's got king 2 here. So the 7 might also be an out. So the way you're going to count your outs here is you know that you're going to need to catch a 10 to reasonably have the best hand. There's 3 10s left in the deck. So you've got 3 outs from the 10. You probably don't have many outs from the 2, from the 7, but you might have an extra out. So you might have 4 outs here. An extra king might give you the best hand if he's got 7-2 or something like that. Or if he's got aces, improving your trips could help. And there's 2 kings left in the deck, so it's probably worth saying you've got about 4.5 or 5 outs here, because you can't count all those outs as great outs, but you can count them as partial outs. So in this case, I would assume that I had 5 outs, which gives us a 20% chance to catch our hand. So you can call if you're putting in less than 20% of the pot. Obviously, counting your outs is really easy when you're talking about hands like this, but there is one more hand worth talking about. That would be if I've got the ace-king on something like a queen. Then we're going to do a jack of clubs, and then we're going to do 2 of diamonds. So here you've got several outs. You've got the 2 overcards. You've got a backdoor flush draw if 2 more clubs were to come, and you've got the nut straight draw. So you know your 10s. If you catch a 10, they're all good outs because you're going to have the nuts, and any 10's good. So you've got 4 good outs there. You've got 2 overcards, which would be 6 outs if you knew both of them were good outs. You don't know if he's already got 2 pair or if he's got one of your outs blocked. Say if he has a king queen or a king jack, your kings aren't good outs. You would only have the 3 outs to the ace. But we can count some of those 6 outs. So it's probably good to count about 4 outs for the overcards, taken along with the 4 outs for the straight draw. That gives us 8 outs. Finally, we do have a backdoor flush draw. It doesn't come in often, but it comes in sometimes. You can count 1.5 outs for a backdoor flush draw to the nuts. So we have 8 outs plus 1.5. That's 9.5 outs, which is actually better than a flush draw. Flush draw only has 9 outs. So, we don't have any really great nut draws here except for the straight draw. But the partial outs from all of our miscellaneous hands that might be good, might not be good, actually give us a really good hand here. So it's important to both count your partial outs but not overvalue them. Make sure that you don't count 6 outs for the ace and the king, 4 outs for the straight, and 1.5 outs, which would give you think 11.5 outs. You don't have that. You've only got about 9.5. So knowing how to count outs in a hand like this will help you keep from overvaluing your hand, but also make sure you get the right value for the cards you do have. That's all that we need to talk about for the counting outs lesson. If you didn't understand some of the stuff in this, go on and check out the how to convert outs into equity lesson. It goes into this in a little bit more detail. Thanks for watching and good luck.